You were a big fan of the show, right? Before you saw it, you had already seen it?
I was a fan of the video game. So I'd played the video game about 8 years ago. And it's a great game if you don't have a relationship or a job or anything else to do in life, because it really does require a lot of attention. And but yeah, I was a fan of that. And then they asked if I'd wanted to step on for the last 2 seasons. And yeah.
Is it weird to step into a role? Because Henry Cavill was playing before, but now you're stepping. Is that weird, or is it kind of fun to see?
Yeah, I was a little hesitant at first. It's a unique situation to come in sort of mid-series and step in for the lead character. I'm a massive fan of Henry Cavill's and a huge fan of what he did in this show. And I think if I wasn't a fan myself, I wouldn't have come on board. But I felt like I could bring something to this character, and I felt like I had an interesting sort of take on this part of the journey.
You bring one hell of a headbutt, my man. It's insane. I love it. I love the fantasy of it too. And it's a pivotal part of the story right now going on.
Yeah.
So is it kind of cool to step in at that part too?
Yeah. I think that was what was really intriguing. Was he's someone who's spent a lot of time in isolation and is pretty comfortable with doing things on his own. But this particular part of the story, he's just come out of a pretty serious fight with one of the really bad guys in the show, and he ends up with a severe injury, and his whole motivation in this show is to find his daughter. And at this point, there's a real struggle there in terms of whether he thinks he's capable enough to go and find his daughter, whether he has the strength to do it. And through this particular part of the story, it's through not only like overcoming his own sort of demons and things, but allowing himself to be helped by others and this group of people that he meets along the way. And I just thought it was a really interesting sort of crossroads and into terms of his sort of emotional
more of a team
state.
rather than isolation.
Yeah.
That's very cool. I have to tell you, I've actually held a real sword. I know that was probably fake, obviously for this movie, but I've held a real one, and it's heavy.
Yeah.
And I was like, how did they do this back then? But you got to take like lessons and everything, right? And sword training?
Yeah.
What was that like?
Yeah, it was difficult. We spent about 3 months before I started shooting season 4 of last year, and I was told by the martial arts sword fighting expert that I picked it up pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And then it was many more hours of sword training and figuring out these pretty intricate fight sequences. But when I was a kid, my grandpa used to make swords for us, and not real ones. They were made out of timber or balsa wood, and they're very soft and whatnot. But so that was kind of my experience going into it, was playing around with swords that my grandpa had made.
Were you sore from sword fighting? It's very, that's a lot of work. And I know you said it's kind of more choreographed than anything, right? It's like a dance almost?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Particularly when you're working with other actors. A lot of my stuff was fighting monsters that weren't actually there, which is it's harder and easier because you don't have to rely on someone else's timing to be in sync and whatnot. But I had
But also hard because it's not there.
Yeah, also you sort of turn up to set and it's a one-man show and you have to make the whole thing work yourself. And feels kind of ridiculous swinging at the air constantly all day, but...
you make it look badass.
Thank you so much.
It's very cool.
Thank you.
It makes me want to be a warrior when I watch stuff like this. I'm like, could I be? I think there's still time. There's still time. So wait, speaking of fight training, you got to work with someone from The Matrix. I'm obsessed with that whole franchise. I think we all are, like when we were kids, right?
Yeah.
Who'd you tell everybody who you worked with?
I worked with Laurence Fishburne.
Yeah.
Who plays Morpheus.
I love him. I love him.
The Matrix is genuinely one of my favorite movies of all
too.
time, and I was so excited when I heard that he was coming on board, and he couldn't have been a nicer guy. I remember the first day that we shot together, and I said to him, and I'd already been shooting about 3 weeks at that time, but I said, how you feeling, man? And he's like, I've got a bit of that sort of first day energy, and I was like, yeah, I'm living with that first day energy right now. But it was so interesting to see someone that's been doing movies for that long, and he's like a little kid. He was still so excited to come to work, and
what a lesson.
Yeah, and he was genuinely just so appreciative to be on set with other actors and telling stories and yeah, not jaded at all. Like he was just such a genuine human.
It is a cool thing we have those moments in our career. You've been doing it for a minute, and then you have those moments where you're like, oh my God, I get to play for a living.
Yeah.
Like that's really cool. Whether you're a musician, whether you're an actor, it's just in the arts in general, it's like, wow, and you get paid for this. It's crazy. That was with him in the new season of The Witcher. You can see more than those 30 seconds on Netflix. Every time you see it, I feel like a badass, and I'm just watching it. Anyway, the show deals with monsters. I heard that you weren't afraid of monsters growing up, but you were afraid of ghosts. Is this true?
Yeah, I was afraid of a lot of things growing up. But particularly, I think I was 11 or 10 or 11. We'll go with a younger age, so it doesn't seem so wimpy. But I watched The Ring. And,
that's creepy as hell.
Yeah, which is still a scary film, and I still have nightmares about that little girl.
Yeah.
But I remember the first time I watched it, and I watched it, I think, with my brothers and some of their friends, and for months afterwards, I would wake up in the middle of the night and, would think the girl was in the room or whatnot. So I would go over to my brother Chris's room, and I'd just go into his room and sleep on the floor next to the bed because I couldn't sleep on my own. It honestly caused me proper trauma, and probably something I should speak to a therapist about.
Yours was The Ring, mine was older. Like, it was The Exorcist. That bitch going down the stairs backwards.
Yeah.
The sound of her fingertips on those stairs haunt me still.
Yeah.
I don't do horror. It's like, what fantasy movies were you into, like, growing up?
Oh, I loved fantasy films when I was a kid. The Labyrinth was a big one. Yeah.
The
Labyrinth was a big one.
I'm in a football fantasy league, and the name of my team is Don't Trust Hoggle. I kid you not.
I love Hoggle.
Oh my God, I loved Hoggle, but you shouldn't have trusted him. Oh my God, I love the Labyrinth.
Yeah, that was one of them. I used to, remember when we used to rent movies at the video store?
Blockbuster, yeah.
At Blockbuster. I used to go there every Friday night with my family, and 9 times out of 10, I would rent The Labyrinth. It was my favorite movie.
I wanted to be Jennifer Connelly so bad. She was
Me too.
so beautiful.
Me too.
In that dress. I was like, you have no power over me. I love that movie so much. I love, too, when people talk about Bowie, because I'm like, my entrance to Bowie was not music. It was him in The Labyrinth.
Me too.
That was who I knew David Bowie, and I was like, he does music too? I was like, it's incredible. I want to bring this up because this is pretty cool. Your brother Chris has a new film, and it's about your dad's battle with Alzheimer's, right? So this is a thing that a lot of families battle with. Your family is so much in the public eye, you're so prominent that it's very cool that y'all are being open about this because it's not an easy subject for families that are going through it. How has this ride been for y'all?
Yeah, I mean, it's incredibly sort of difficult thing, I think, for anyone who's had someone they love that's going through it. Mm-hmm. What was really interesting for me personally was I saw things, and I saw my dad talk about things that I don't think he'd necessarily would have spoken about with me. I don't think we would have had those conversations, and it was really nice to, I think, put Chris in a room with Dad and, and hear him talk about his feelings and, not wanting to be a burden and not wanting, this,
That's one of the big conversations.
It's kind of hard, it's hard for me to talk about, but I think it's really insightful, and it also, I think, is really educational and shows a lot of things that you can do for people that are going through Alzheimer's, and things that you can do to help prevent that.
To be preventative,
Yeah, be preventative and the longevity of, brain health and all these things. But, it's
really important, though,
touching
that
episode.
It's hard to talk about, but it's really important when you do talk about stuff like that, because like I said, so many people go through it and nobody really wants to talk about it because it's so sad.
Yeah.
But it is a reality for a lot of people.
Yeah, and I think that was what was nice for me was seeing my dad talk about how he feels about it. You know, and questions, him being asked these questions that I don't think. It's hard for you to ask your dad those sort of things and have that kind of conversation, but it was really beautiful, and I think it's just a really a nice look into sort of things that people can do if they're experiencing.
Well, we need another break. Season 4 of The Witcher is on Netflix. Check it out, everybody.